Okay, I've been tied up on a gurney and injected with weird drugs. Typical Friday night, and also one of the things we do in the assembly. I'm here with Patrick to talk about the game. Pat, thanks very much for joining us today. What is the assembly?
So the Assembly is an adventure game designed for VR right from day one for Morpheus and Oculus Rift. The Assembly is this organisation who are scientists and engineers who want to do sort of tests and experiments that aren't legally allowed or aren't maybe slightly morally questionable, but they believe are in the public good, and they have created this big underground laboratory HQ, and the game sees you exploring this as a couple of different characters, finding out this rich, powerful story.
So what came first for you guys? Was it the VR tech or the story? Which chicken or egg?
It was a little bit of both. We did a lot of experimenting with VR to see what worked and what didn't work, and one thing we found was that actually a slow-paced adventure game where you're exploring and looking around and figuring stuff out worked really well for VR. So we decided that's what we wanted to do, and the story kind of came from that.
And with the assembly, with this sort of experimentation, I mean, even the trailer that we got to see just during the presentation is incredibly dark in a way in terms of the subject matter. I mean, how are you treating that? Is it a very serious game, drama, like you said?
Yeah, it has a really powerful story, lots of dialogue. It's a really emotional story, and there's quite a lot of moral decisions you have to make in there. So there's a lot of questioning what's right and what's wrong. But it's also a really fun game at its heart. So it's about solving puzzles, it's about exploring, it's about adventuring. It's kind of a great VR adventure game.
Okay. And with the two different distinct perspectives, can you sort of elaborate on what they are, who they are, and importantly, just with what you were saying in the presentation, how that actually affects the different VR experience you have?
So you play as two different characters. One's Madeline, who's this scientist who's kind of been drugged and bundled into this place and is going through an initiation process effectively to join. And there's another guy called Joel who's been there for a couple of years and is starting to question, how the organisation works. One of the nice things in VR is you really notice the difference playing the characters. One character's a lot taller than the other, and that sounds very simple, but actually in VR, when you see the door frame is a lot lower as you switch characters, that makes a big difference. They sound different, they have different footsteps, they talk differently, and you really notice feeling the different characters as you play the game.
Okay, with now you mentioned obviously it was placeholder sort of voiceover, but with that idea about having the characters sort of talk to themselves, now obviously very important because there's no real sort of sense of where you are, what you're doing. You have to introduce those particular mechanics. But how you guys approach it because it is a slow burn story game. How do you find with the monologue? I mean, what's too much, too little? Are you guys sort of judging out?
Yeah, we've been playing around with that, and I think we've got a nice balance. We wanted to get a lot of story in there. We wanted to get quite a lot of narrative, but also you're on your own quite a bit as well, exploring. And so, one thing we've found in VR is that players don't necessarily want to dive into action, do lots of stuff straight away. They want to look around, they want to explore the room they're in, they want to look up at the cobwebs on the wall and see the detail, because VR is brilliant at that. So we allow people the time to do that, and we tried not to let the narrative get in the way, but we've got this great story that pops up all the time. We've got tannoy announcements of people that talk to you, and your character chats about stuff, and we think that works pretty well.
With that, because at the start of the demo we played, one of the doctors, if that's what they are, basically exclaims, "Why are you still conscious?" And they put you under. Now you wake up in a situation where your room's being gassed, you have to escape. But you mentioned there'll be characters that will talk to you. So, I mean, it's not a specific sort of stealth adventure where you're having to try and hide from discovery. How does it play out?
No, so it's not an action game, and we didn't want something where you had to dash quickly from cover to cover and do stuff and run around and spin around 180 degrees fast, because we didn't think that was really, at the moment, that's not the best use of VR. So really the core gameplay is exploration, puzzle solving, figuring out what's going on, and there's a nice mix of kind of physics puzzles, and so we use things like binoculars and microscopes, and there's a camera that you take photos, and there's a lot of really cool little gadgets that work well in VR. So it's a mix of that and exploration and just following the story and finding out what's going on.
We were using just the standard joypad today. Are you guys looking at, I saw a photograph of the Morpheus with the Move controller. So are you guys looking at different sort of peripherals to immerse yourself a lot deeper into the experience?
We're certainly keeping an eye on what's going on. I mean, one thing that's important for us is we want anybody who buys a VR headset to be able to play this, regardless of which peripheral they have. At the moment, the DualShock 4 for Morpheus is a great controller. It rotates, it spins, it's very easy to use in VR. Move is fantastic if you want to do lots of stuff with your hands. We're not sure that's absolutely necessary for this game, but we're certainly playing around with it, and we may end up using that. For Oculus, The controllers are a little bit less known at the moment. There's a lot of very cool little controllers. We never know whether they're going to be successful commercially or not. So we kind of have to design with controllers, but also with mouse and keyboard in. And keyboard's a challenge in VR because you can't see the keys. So you have to kind of use the cursor keys and the spacebar and nothing else other than that. So we're working hard with controls, and we'll try and support as much that we think is going to be commercially viable.
Okay, so with that, with using the gadgets like the phone and stuff, I mean, how's that represented in game? Do you actually see your hands as you lift it up? How does it work?
Yeah, so at the moment, actually, we don't have your hands in the game because we decided that it might be a little bit off-putting, and there's the budget for this game is definitely not what a AAA budget is. Unfortunately, that's the nature of our studio and what we have. So at the moment, we don't have the hands in there. We have, the camera appears in front of you. You can take photos. We have, you pick things up and they appear in your inventory. It's possible something that we will add in as we do the polish layer later on. We're not sure yet, so to be decided. We're not sure it's absolutely necessary. Sometimes if it does stuff that doesn't look like what you're doing, it kind of breaks the immersion. Sometimes it's easier just not to have your body in there. Actually, it's not something that we think is always necessary, and there's some fantastic VR demos out in there that don't have hands and bodies that work very nicely. So at the moment we don't have one in there, but we'll keep an eye on it, and we'll be playing around, and maybe we'll end up polishing it and adding that in at a later stage.
Can we sort of talk about nDreams just briefly? I mean, how many people are you basically working on this?
So we've got about 28 people in the studio, and about 26 of those have involved in VR in one way or another. So we're growing fairly fast at the moment. We've got probably 4 or 5 different VR projects on the go, of which this is the biggest. This is sort of in full development, and we're doing a mix of games and also some other kind of more experienced type stuff, which isn't necessarily gamey, that we think will work really nicely with VR. And yeah, we're expanding, so we'll see how that goes.
Is it a case? I mean. VR, given how much we've seen of it since Oculus came out, it exploded basically, and a lot of the sort of high-priced peripherals in the past have become almost like have ended up just being very niche sort of markets. But I guess for you guys, you sort of see this as a very concrete, almost mainstream future.
I certainly hope so, and I think the great news is that things like Facebook buying Oculus really should help keep the price down. They don't have to make a profit; they can sell the hardware at cost in order to try and make it successful. And I think that's going to be a really good thing. The price is coming down on the components all the time. The technology is getting better every single month. One of the fun things for us working with Oculus and Morpheus during this development phase is the hardware is always changing, which is interesting and a challenge, but actually is very exciting as well. So no, I think it'll start with gamers, and you'll see kind of core gamers probably starting off, particularly with Morpheus, but I think you'll see VR expand rapidly, and it depends what kind of headsets come out as well. There's lots of really interesting headsets on Kickstarter and possibly other headsets that will launch from other big companies as well. So I think it's going to be a really exciting 12 months, and I think you'll see it go a lot more widespread than you think.
So basically, the technology is just one step ahead of you guys, basically.
Yeah, we're playing catch up all the time, which is fun.
Just to ask, I mean, is there any thought about releasing a version of this game that won't need VR support?
Yeah, we've certainly considered that. I mean, it was designed with VR in mind, and there's a lot of cool stuff that works well in VR, but it kind of depends. We'll have a look at that commercially. There's actually no reason why it's just not a fantastically good adventure game on Steam and on PSN without VR. So we'll consider that, I think, closer to launch and see. It's going to be better with VR, but hopefully it'll be a really strong game without it as well. So maybe.
Okay. Obviously, I both on Oculus and Morpheus. How have you guys found with the different technology tinkering around? Were there any sort of pros, cons?
Yeah, I mean, they're very similar technology-wise. Morpheus has an advantage in that you've got a controller, the DualShock 4, which everybody has, and it works well with VR. It's very easy to use with a headset. And the audio for Morpheus is very, very strong as well. Oculus has some advantages in that it's open. It's very easy to tinker with because it's on PC. It allows there's lots of experimenting going on there in a way that there isn't with the Morpheus. So that's a big plus side. But tech-wise, they're very similar. I mean, the DK2 and the Morpheus are not too far away at all.
We're actually just come from talking to the E-Valkyrie guys. We're talking about actually the cables and everything like that. I mean, obviously enough, that's not for you guys to work out, but I was just wondering whether you had any thoughts about, for people plugging this into their living room and stuff like that, what's the solution for all the cables to avoid people from tripping up? I mean, have you guys had any thoughts on that?
Well, I don't see why. You need to do wireless HDMI from things now. Effectively, if you have a battery and wireless HDMI, I'm sure it's a solvable problem. So I hope you'll see. I mean, the nice thing is you'll see these headsets develop, and you're seeing them develop already. If you look at the difference between the DK1 and the DK2, it's huge. And I think as you see the final consumer versions arrive, many more of those issues will be solved, and there may still be some to go. But I think you'll end up seeing wireless headsets and much smaller. Remember the first mobile phones were the size of bricks, and look at them now. And I think you'll see the same thing happen with VR headset design.
Listen, thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us.
Thank you.